At one level, last night's debate here on Sky reflected well on both the Prime Minister and the opposition leader. The PM especially on top of the facts, confident, tone spot on and very much in command. And bouncing back after his week from hell, Anthony Albanese might not have landed in great blows, but he didn't mortally wound himself either, although I'll get to his comments on boats a little later when we speak with Peter Dutton. But given where he was, it could have been a lot worse for Labor. And before a receptive audience, Albanese ended up slightly ahead of the PM, 40 votes to 35, with still plenty of undecideds, even after an hour with our nation's leaders. That says it all, doesn't it? The recent polls are about where last night's debate was. It's a tight race. Lots of decideds too in the polls and last night. There were, of course, lots of questions about support for small business, integrity in government, trust in our political system, nurses in aged care and NDIS, and of course, China's move to establish a military base in Solomon Islands, thrown in by Kieran Gilbert. Based on what people asked, Australians want their government to do more for them. They want more help for vulnerable people and more support for businesses doing it tough. And both the PM and the alternative PM agree that it's government's job to help. Scott Morrison agreed that the NDIS was a vital change for the better and singled out Julia Gillard and Bill Shorten for making it happen, even though the way it was set up by Gillard puts the Commonwealth on the hook for increased funding, but with no real control over how it runs. As set up under Labor, the NDIS was supposed to cover 400,000 people and cost $14 billion a year. It's now covering 500,000 people and costing $29 billion, or more than double the original estimates. Within a decade, the Australian Financial Review reports today, the government actuarial estimates will have it at 860,000 participants and cost $60 billion, or almost 4 times the original estimate under Gillard. Yet both leaders answered as if government doesn't have any role in managing the costs of this program, when, like all spending, it's got to do what it was promised, but also deliver taxpayers, rightly, value for money. Just because a program is there for the most vulnerable doesn't mean we don't subject it to proper scrutiny and ensure the most vulnerable do get the support they need and deserve, while removing any opportunity for rorting and waste. So last night, the Labor leader should have been called upon to justify the NDIS budget blowouts, and the coalition leader should have been explaining what could be done to fix it. Because for the NDIS to succeed, it's got to help those who most need it, but also operate with financial integrity. That's because we can't just spend more and more, all of it ultimately coming from you, the taxpayer, even on the best of causes, without a proper national debate on what we're really doing. Wherever you look right now, there's this assumption we can have our cake and eat it too. Yes, China might be more aggressive, but that somehow nuclear subs in 20 years' time will sort out the problems. Yes, we need to achieve net zero emissions, we're told, by at least 2050, but that there'll be no increase in power prices when we shut down coal, when we walk away from gas, when we refuse to look at nuclear, when we move to green hydrogen that hasn't even been invented at scale, or that our trillion-dollar debt never has to be paid back. Last night, the assumption of both leaders was that nothing much needs to change. Scott Morrison thinks the government's doing a good job, it's got just about everything right, so why change anything at all? And his rival thinks Australia's such a great country that all we really need to do is change the bloke in the lodge and a few ministers around the cabinet table. But it's 70 years since our prosperity and our security looked this vulnerable. Never have we been less able to take anything for granted. Yet there was scarcely a hint from either leader last night that anything was amiss, because that would demand difficult and contentious policy changes that might need leaders to leave their political comfort zones. I'm sure that's why 25% of the room weren't swayed either way. They get the sense that both sides are glossing over the real challenges and what we have to contemplate as a country in order to meet them. But if a hung parliament were to result from a record vote for minor parties and independents, that would mean an even more Green left Labor minority government, or an even more Labor light coalition minority government. In other words, just about the worst possible result for our country.